Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our glorious round table that we have planned tonight. I am joined by some of our awesome community content creators. Nice Gaming, who many of you know. We've done Q&As before. Nice, how you doing, buddy? Welcome.
Good. How are you? Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. I know you've been chatting with your community, helping to kind of curate some of the questions, making sure that we're getting answers that people want to hear. I think we're going to have a fun night tonight. Thank you for joining us. I always enjoy your content.
Yes, thank
And
you.
we also have Vladis, the glorious Vladis. Vladis, how you doing, brother? Love the hat.
Thank you, thank you. Inspired by a pretty good person I used to know, or I do know, thankfully.
Used to know. Oh my God, am I dead already?
No. Great to see everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's going to be an awesome one. I can't wait.
Always enjoy your content as well, Vladis. Of course, you have great conversations, great theory crafting. You're very close to your community, as is nice, of course. So happy to have you. And then we have joining us Lude Lloyd. Lude Lloyd, where did that name come from? Where did Lude Lloyd come from?
Lloyd is actually like my favorite game character from Legend of the Dragoon. He's like the hero.
Is that a weeb show?
Oh my God, Steven.
It's a Japanese RPG, so yeah, you can go with weeb. But yeah, then there's Lude. I like watching the anime. I'm a little bit of a weeb, so yeah.
Nice.
You're not too far off, actually.
Happy to have you, brother. Always love your videos that you produce. You have great takes, great theory crafting, positive attitude. Want to see the success of the game. Happy to have you and your questions today as well.
Thank you.
And Zyback TV, our resident PvP ganking extraordinaire. Zyback, how you doing, brother?
Doing good. But
I
glad to be here.
remember the first time I think that we ever met. You were streaming, I believe it was Crowfall.
Correct. Yeah.
And I jumped into your chat because I was looking around, loved Gordon, loved J. Todd Coleman.
Yeah.
Really thought that the vision that they had for Crowfall was great. And when they did their launch, I was going around different streams and checking in and see how things were going. And I jumped into your stream, I think I recall, and said, "Hey, how's this game looking?"
Yeah, you were chatting me up for like an hour. Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty
that
cool.
was fun.
Hey, you got
That was
Blair
awesome.
now.
I know we do have Blair.
Yeah.
Blair is phenomenal. Love Blair. Blair is a
Yep.
great dude. Did an unbelievable job with the phishing implementation. Probably one of our cleanest complex feature implementations that we've actually ever had. So very excited to have Blair and excited to have you too and your questions. I know you represent a great demographic in the community, having significant interest in PvP.
Correct.
So excited to have your takes as well. Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Everyone in the audience, thank you for tuning in. I know that it is a late night tonight. Obviously, things at the studio are very hectic right now. We are literally in the final stretch towards our early access launch on Steam. That's on December 11th. Which is holy shit, 2 days away. Oh, can I say that? Are we mature audience tonight? I mean, it is.
Yeah, sure.
Very
It's
mature.
late. Most people
go
are
with
asleep that are underage, right? But it has been a mad dash for us. So I actually didn't know that this was scheduled for the evening until literally I was in my director's triage about an hour ago, and Margaret was like, you have that that Q&A tonight. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna need to make a cup of coffee because this morning started at 5 a.m. But as usual, as I've told you guys, I am very conversational. I know that you guys have questions. I think it's great for the audience if we converse about some of those questions back and forth a little bit. So I of course can be a Q&A pinata. You can hit me and I can throw out answers, but I can also talk about the answers with you. And I think that that's something that the community prefers because they get a lot of insight. And I'm happy to have those conversations with you guys. So let's get into it. We might go beyond an hour. Which one of you has your first question ready?
All right, I will start us off. MMOs, including Ashes of Creation, often have problems, especially in PvP, balancing ranged versus melee. How do you plan to better incentivize melee and melee auto attacks and improve time to kill so large-scale PvP isn't just interactions from a distance?
That is an age-old dilemma. And I think that many of us have probably seen different games tackle this problem in different ways. As a matter of fact, those of you who have been around for several years may recall that back in the early Alpha 1 implementation days, I had the bright idea. Wasn't actually turned out to be a bright idea, but I had the bright idea of setting a minimum distance on on the ranged weapons. So if ever a target came within that threshold, you actually could not use your ranged weapon. And that actually had a more negative response from the community. There are ways that we can address this that relate to like damage fall off, relate to accuracy fall off. You can have power scaling difference between, ranged weapons and melee weapons. You can apply hit effects on melee weapons like, disables or hamstringing your target to some degree. You also have cone of effects that apply to our melee weapons right now, which allow you to do more of a type of AoE style to it. How do we plan to better incentivize melee and ranged weapons going forward? I know that this is a topic on the combat team side. And there's some lively discussions between the combat designers on how they want to approach this. I don't necessarily have an answer that I can give you right now that's like, we're definitively going to take this path. But I can tell you that what we want to do is we want to try a number of ideas, likely on the PTR to begin with.
Yes.
Get player feedback, see how that, how that plays with the other systems. And then we'll probably hone in on an approach there. But generally it's going to be within the vicinity of some of those things that I mentioned and how other games have dealt with this, right?
Yeah. And those things that you suggested as examples, I'd love to try any of those on PTR. That's really good.
I like Fiddy Jen says, we have concepts of a plan. We do. We have concepts of many plans, actually. But we don't want to willy-nilly this into the release stream. We want to take the time to get the player feedback on which of these types of approaches are preferred.
All right.
I have two small suggestions on that while I've got the man here. Take wound off of longbow. I don't think the longbow needs a healing debuff, and that would make it exclusive to melee weapons, the healing debuff.
Yeah.
So I think that is a place to start. I don't think longbow needs any help anyway. It's already like sort of the meta weapon outside of that. And this one is going to be a little controversial, and that is I would consider not adding the assist target feature into the game whatsoever. The feature where you, like, let's say Steven is targeting somebody, where everybody in the raid can just snap on that target, aimbot, 50 guys all hit the same guy.
I like
instantly.
this guy.
That feature, just don't make it. Just don't make it.
I love watching chat because you have half the people that are like, yes, and then you got the other people that are like, ban this guy.
Yeah.
But now you know the problem of design. You know what I mean? Like, you have this concept, you have this thought, you're never going to please everyone.
So the assist target, I feel very strongly about, because I think there is a skill in having the battlefield awareness to be able to read that and find your target and have the people in your group do it, rather than just hitting target assist raid leader and having 50 people aimbot onto some poor bastard and he explodes.
I got to tell you, one of my favorite things during Lineage 2 sieges was coming up against a Hawkeye party, or any archer party basically that was on the siege field, and they all had their macro set to aim assist off one dude, and they had their blade dancer, and they had their sword singer, and it literally was just switching targets. It was just tabbing between targets. It was a tab between dead. It was just like, and then they became the battlefield priority. You were like, we need to take that archer team out, but they had max range. And probably a lot of us have experienced that.
Ugh.
Yeah, I was also sorry. I was also thinking along the lines of like melee versus ranged attacks having different power as well.
Yes,
could be a potential
the melee is
solution.
already a little bit better, but it's not enough to for the Yeah,
I
consistency.
think it's a
Yeah.
problem in your game where melee characters are using their ranged weapons even when someone are right in front of them.
It definitely is, and that's why I said, there is a lively debate amongst the combat designers on how to address the issue. We're aware of the issue. We see the issue. It's front and center in our minds, as a balance point between those two, itemization choices. And I think there are a lot of healthy ideas that once we get it into the hands of the PTR testers, we're going to get better direction on what is appropriate for the community and for the current design of the game.
Sweet.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
say this? Just it's not really regarding this, but just A and B testing and PTR. I really wish that you guys could label like, hey, we're going to try this thing, because most of the time when there's a patch note, people think that this is just now the philosophy or this is now the thing.
Yeah, that's a great idea. For sure.
So just adding like, hey, we're going to do some A and B testing with like ranged combat. Tell us what you like in this patch compared to the future patch that's going to happen. Just
Yeah,
like
I think that's a great idea. I wish I had a producer present that could take this as an action item, because that's a great point in how we facilitate the PTR testing. As you said, right now, when you see something on a change list, a lot of people lose sight of the fact that could be temporary. That could be a test. That could be a balance point that's going to get rejiggered. We saw that with some of the TTK improvements, some of the combat stats. Like, it's constantly an ebb and flow before we find the exact middle in the right place. That's pretty standard, but that's a very good point.
And Adam's going to take notes for you.
Oh, perfect. Adam, that's an action item. Go for it, buddy.
Done. All right.
All right.
I guess I'll move on to my question.
All right.
With all 8 archetypes finally launching December 11th, how proud are you of the current status of them? And has there been a desire internally to change or rework the archetypes at their base to synergize with the upcoming 64 class system?
So has there been a desire to internally change or rework archetypes? Yes, there is actually a initiative that is scheduled for next milestone at the start of the new year. And what that initiative is taking into account is, you saw an early preview of the cleric skill tree rework, right? I think we showed that up back in like maybe
July.
October, September.
Mhm.
Oh my God, where does the time
it was
go?
a little preview in July.
Okay, it felt like literally yesterday. But in order to complete that across all the archetypes, first action item for the team is going to be completing the audit. And the audit is going to go through and identify mainly 3 axes. First and foremost is, what is the disposition of DPS skills per archetype versus utility skills versus defensive skills versus mobility skills. Now that we have the full 8 archetypes in place, we're going to go through each of them in understanding how they play right now. What's the balance essentially from a group dynamic perspective, and then how do we want to inform either new skill creation to fill the gaps that we identify as part of that audit. And then the second axis that we're going to be working on is balance, right? We're talking about numbers, specific damage values, cooldown values, mana cost requirements. That's going to be an important step of the archetype audit. And then the third is going to be effect synergy. Right. So how do conditions promote off of each other? How do they interact with other archetypes? And all of that's going to be in order for us to best set up ourselves for what will then come likely in the following milestone after that, which is going to be going down the path of augmentation and developing out the classes. So we first want to establish the archetype base now that we have all 8 in place and we can get the proper testing. And then that's also going to include the rank systems that we're going to incorporate across the board for the archetypes within the skill tree. And that's going to be our focus in the next milestone. Did that answer your question? Was that actually the answer to the question? That's how we're reworking.
I guess kind of. So there's going to be essentially some reworks that are coming in to kind of reestablish skill trees. I guess a lot of the community is asking mostly buff fighter, help mage out with sustain, maybe not have their mobility tied to their CC break, stuff like that.
Yeah. So all of like those things that are at the top of the mind of the community in playing these archetypes right now in their current form are a part of our, information in how we go through the audit when we determine things like missing mobility or inaccurate promotions, synergy between the abilities. What are the cost requirements in order to utilize, life steal for the fighter or for mobility for the mage? Like all of those things, the community teams watch the Discord, they watch the forums, they watch the CCs, the content creators, and they collate that information into reports that are given on a biweekly basis to each of the teams. So we have all of that information that's collected from a feedback perspective, and then that's incorporated when the teams set out their plan to actually do the work.
And
during
then,
that, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Will.
sorry, just one last part.
Nerf fighter, it's
while
overpowered. Someone just said that in chat.
True. I actually know who that is. No, and the second part to that is the upcoming 64 class system. We're expecting this to synergize, these like skill trees and everything to synergize with what is to come in the future, and that these base archetypes are being set up for success rather than failure, and rebalancing nightmare.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, that would be what would be considered part of the success criteria, the acceptance criteria of the audit. That we're essentially setting ourselves up for what will be the next milestone, which is the augmentation work, which is really the synergy of the classes amongst themselves. So that's kind of how we operate. I know that the combat team has a lot of plans already in place for that through both their own introspection, but also their inspection of the feedback that the community has garnered while playing these classes through phase 1, 2, and 3.
Is it just a rebalancing, or will we potentially see any brand new abilities of these base classes?
The brand new abilities is the first axis, right? So that's like, hey, this tank class is missing utility, right? Because when we stack it up against the other archetypes, and where the tank is supposed to, and I'm just using this as an example, where the tank is supposed to exist, is 3 out of 8 in the scale of the 8 archetypes with regards to utility numbers, but they're not meeting that because they don't have enough abilities that fit the utility criteria. So
Fighter.
that might or for fighter, right? That might then result in either completely new abilities being made and introduced into the skill tree, or a rework of existing abilities to add additional effects to them, right? And then the second one was balance, and the third was effects, right? So that's kind of the approach of auditing the archetypes.
All right. You want me to move on to my question?
Sure.
Okay. I guess I made this very quick and short, but just to give preface. So, Steven, you made a tweet, a pretty long one. And I think in the majority of that tweet, I would say the minority of that tweet, you mentioned pushing for beta next year. Yes. So there's been a lot of how are we going to achieve that? We know how huge this project is. So I'm gonna list off some systems for you, and you're gonna kind of tell me, is this gonna meet launch, or is this system potentially delayed or even cut? Okay.
Well, yeah, let me just first address that for a second. So
Sure.
With regards to us moving into beta, obviously our goal is to get to beta in a sustainable, quality driven way, right?
Absolutely.
And our focus for beta is to establish the core systems of the project, but also making sure that we're answering our Kickstarter promises, because at the end of the day, this project was born from Kickstarter. And so at a minimum, those Kickstarter promises are going to be fulfilled. Now, to what degree that, content and features that we've, brought along the way might get deprecated for a post-release update, that's still outstanding conversation, right? And that changes literally on a month-to-month basis, right? As we inform both the resources that we have from a developer's perspective, how many developers we're onboarding, how many outsource houses we're onboarding, what our timeline facilitates as a need based off of our live testing. And now we're moving into a live testing environment that's going to have a lot more people through Steam. That's going to demand more of our developer resources to address the current issues as opposed to focusing on the future feature or content development, right? That's always the split that live service games have problems with, is maintaining the live service while also the forward perspective. That could change on a month-to-month basis.
Absolutely.
So I can give you some answers here as it stands today, so long as every person listening understands that that is subject to change. And I know that I say this all the time, and I'm like a broken record, and everybody, nobody ever remembers it when they say, but Steven said this. Well, yes, Steven did say that, but Steven also said that that shit is subject to change. Let's not forget that, because that's a very important byproduct of every statement I make, right?
I'm sure
yeah.
the MMORPG subreddit, they'll understand.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They'll understand.
I'm sure that the Sea of Salt will understand that.
They're always so hopeful over there.
Yes,
I think it's
right.
just it's perspective, right? I think the people that, I think all the content creators here, a lot of people that have been deep in this community for a long time, want to be able to educate new people as to like, well, because a new person be like, oh, they're already pushing for beta. Isn't this game super massive? Like, so I just want to be able to give us the ammunition so we can educate people. That's really more my thing. So I'm going to list off some stuff, and
right.
And if you want to discuss further after that, we can make a discussion, but just for context.
Sure.
So first item, second continent.
So I would say
Jesus,
that's a good start.
I will just be honest that where we are today, when I look at the game that we're delivering, when I look at the size of the first continent, when I look at the POIs that are ahead of us to develop in making that first continent, sustainable and rich with content and having a lot of players there, the second continent does not meet my MVP requirements. It is a would like to have, and if we find the right outsource partners to expedite development of that, then the jury's still out on whether or not we will have the second continent. But for launch, correct? Right. Yes, for launch. Now, if I were to cut something that would get us to a polished, finished state for all the core systems and have enough content to facilitate 10,000 concurrent players on a server, I do believe that the first continent is sufficient for that. And the second continent is a potential follow post the initial launch. And it makes sense for the second continent to be a good follow post launch. Right. Is the decision made on that front? No, it is not. Because again, how we move into the next year, how we leverage outsource partners could greatly expedite all the content requirements in order for us to have a second continent at launch versus after launch.
Right. And okay, so next one, we talk about 64 classes. So are 64 classes with all augments in schools still on the table for launch?
That is correct. Yes. 64 classes are an MVP requirement.
Okay. Level 50.
Level 50 is an MVP requirement.
Tolnar and Underrealm.
Tolnar is actually Tolnar has made a lot of progress, and Tolnar I absolutely do consider to be in by launch. Yes. Underrealm. Now, Underrealm, we have the assets for the Underrealm in order to build out those locations. We have a few locations that are built but not accessible right now for the Underrealm. Now, the original intent for the Underrealm was to be very expansive across the entirety of the continent. I do foresee there being a potential for us to dial that back to some degree, making sure that the Underrealm is present at overland choke points, having alternative options for transit through the world, because that's really the strength that the Underrealm provides from a gameplay perspective, if we're talking about viable gameplay loops and core content. So yes, the Underrealm will be present as an MVP requirement, but it will be potentially scaled back in its prevalence throughout the continent.
That's good to hear. The settlement system fully completed, like with all 4 types, all buildings.
Yes, as you know, we did recently announce, I think it was a few months ago, that we removed an entire level from the settlement for launch. Now we are leaving open the opportunity to reintroduce that level post launch. So right now, originally they were intended to be 6 levels. And right now we are planning on 5 levels of settlement, but they will have 4 types, and they will continue to have different election types.
Okay. And instance dungeons?
Yes, we will have instance dungeons.
The naval
and the instancing tech will likely be worked on starting next milestone. So you may see some initial you may see some initial PTR testing of that in the first quarter of next year.
The animal husbandry system and breeding system fully by launch.
Animal husbandry system, yes, and breeding system is planned for by launch as well.
The freehold system fully completed by launch or delayed.
Freehold system is going to be fully completed by launch, and it is something that we are planning to prioritize in our next milestone as well, which is not just the freehold system getting up to par with where we want it to be. I know we disabled freeholds several months ago, and that was because while the system was functioning from a core implementation functional standpoint, meaning there were freeholds in the world, you could own a freehold, you could plant some shit on the freehold, you had a house on the freehold. What we need to do is further develop the deployable technology, our deployable tech, which is the ability to place furniture within the house in a way that is conducive to a good experience, customization, having
Like meaningful.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. We have the items produced for that as well. Like all the assets are done. So next milestone, we plan to work on finishing up freeholds. The systems team is going to be working on that. But in addition to that, we'll also be introducing new settlement layouts that incorporate static housing, which was always intended. You know, because it shares a lot of tech between freehold and static housing. And then once we have instancing online, which again we're going to be working on next month, it might even include some bare minimum instancing of the apartment system and or the inn system. We're going to have a heavy focus on housing starting next milestone.
Monster coin system.
Yes, Monster Coin system, as you saw, an initial implementation of that with our little ancients that we had, I think last year sometime. That has been stood up from a functional standpoint. Now we just need to build progression and incorporate the additional creature types.
Combat pets.
Combat pets could potentially
Be cut. They're gone.
cut.
They're eliminated.
Yes, they could be. We will see.
We're not going to argue with you about it.
We will have it. I'm
Oh
aware that combat pets are not, you know, super popular, but it is something, you know, we already have the system and technology in place for that because it shares with the summoner, you know, pet tech essentially. But it's something that we are discussing on the design side.
And last one, constellations.
Constellations will be in, yes.
Zyback, it's yours, bro. I'm so satisfied right now.
Okay. So corruption system. Just to preface this,
and by the way, let me just, I'm sorry, real quick. Let me just reiterate because I see a few comments in a few comments in chat. When I say that these things are not MVP for launch necessarily, or they're being considered not MVP for launch, that doesn't mean they're being removed from the game. It means that what isn't necessary for launch will be in a patch post-launch. So if I'm referring to the second continent, if I'm referring to the expansion of the Underrealm, those are things that we would work to introduce post-launch. So just be aware of that.
Okay.
Yes.
So corruption system. I just want to preface this question because I know we have a bunch of people that aren't familiar with how it currently works, and there's a lot of people worried about things that they shouldn't be worried about. Like the main concern that people that don't know about this game, they think that it's just max level characters running around killing low level characters, and that's what happens. That doesn't happen. So please, people in the Twitch chat, for anybody freaking out, answer their questions. My question is, what are the plans to change the corruption system into something that people actually engage with in good faith? As of right now, people either never use it, they're victims of corruption baiting, or they engage with the system in bad faith by bypassing the consequences through various means. And it's kind of been like that for a year.
Yeah, it has. And just to level set why it has been that way for the year, we obviously want to test corruption. It is a core mechanism of open world risk, right? The flagging system is a core risk introduction, right? At any given time, you see, you know, a dude or a dudette walking next to you, you got a pack on your back, and you know, you're looking at each other and you're like, is that a friend or a foe? In any other game without that, you know, open world flagging system, you don't ever have to wonder that. It's like, oh, I don't give a shit about you. You know, you might as well just be an NPC, right? Because you can't interact with me. What we want the flagging system to do is introduce risk. We want it to be able to make sure that even though it's unlikely for someone to murder you when you leave your house every day, someone could murder you. That sucks. Like, but it is a reality of life. It's an element of unpredictability, which makes you consider actions and strategies and plans that you may not normally consider. And as a result of that, the corruption system has a place. Now, with that being said, as you said, in a game that I played, again referencing Lineage 2, that had a similar system, although I considered it to have more drawbacks. That type of interaction for a non-faction based open world is necessary. It's a necessary component for a PvX game. And you really never saw anybody go corrupt. You really didn't. It was very rare. And it was usually coinciding with either a super heightened level of emotion, like that person just hated your fucking guts or hated your guild's guts, or you did something wrong to them. Or it was opportunistic, right? Where it's like, you have a thing that I want and you didn't take the necessary strategy to protect yourself. I'm going to take advantage of this situation. That's when it occurred, which was rare. How are we going to address corruption in its current state? Well, a few things need to happen for that feature in order for it to be fully fledged. First and foremost, there's a complementary bounty hunter system, which is not introduced in the game yet. The bounty hunter system is the pull to the corruption's push, right? And that system is missing an entire half of it, which is meaning that, like, if somebody goes corrupt, they're red. And there are bounty hunters in the world who now should be notified of that person's location, where they are. They're going to pursue them. They'll be incentivized through quest rewards in order to do so. And there's a cat and mouse interaction between the corrupt player and the bounty hunter themselves, that allows for the corrupt player not to accrue additional corruption should they engage in combat with that bounty hunter. Whereas if you're not a bounty hunter, you give additional corruption for being murdered by that corrupt player. So it's like a never-ending, slippery slope that eventually takes you into irrelevance or loss of significant amount of gear, which just becomes untenable as a decision point for the player unless they're really quitting the game. So that's one element of change that needs to be introduced. Additionally, we're aware of the bypass that is incorporated in corruption when you have a friend next to you and they can just murder you and grab anything that drops and make sure to give it back. We'll do some tuning around that. We'll think about, can gear be destroyed? Does corruption now have a minimum timer? When you die, should your corpse spawn at your resurrection point, which is random and not in an ember spring, and somewhere out in the world? There's ways that we can address that we just haven't spent the time yet to really design around and adjust. Now, once we are getting into probably not the next milestone, but the milestone thereafter, with corruption adjustments, we're going to be drilling in on the feedback. We're going to be drilling in on, commentary from the community. How does this satisfy certain intended systems? How are we bringing on the bounty hunter system to accompany it, and when? Those things will go into how we address it. Right now, I want to leave corruption overtuned. And the reason why is because it doesn't have the complementary systems that it's intending to have, and it shouldn't be a viable play path. There's a lot of now lawless territory and reasons to be in those lawless territories, which absolve the need for corruption amongst the PvP focused communities, right? You have rare resources that can be located within these corrupted zones around the harbingers that are incentivizing player interaction in order to acquire these wild card resources that are very valuable. You have fishing, deep sea fishing, which is literally a gold faucet within the economy that is acquired out in the open seas, that is, open flagging. So those types of systems, I think, are going to further reduce the lifting that corruption does for the more PvP centric communities to a degree. And I think we'll tide those over until we get to it in the second milestone of next year.
So just to follow up on that.
Yep.
Have you considered maybe not having item drop be the penalty? Because right now, I think a lot of people have a problem with the corruption system in that there's perverse incentives, and the system is intended to protect like the lesser experienced newer players, but in reality they're the biggest victims because there are endless clips of people dropping their like legendary long sight bows because they fell victim to a corruption baiting bug or whatever, and generally the hardcore guilds are going to find out about that kind of stuff more quickly. So have you ever thought, okay.
Yeah. No, please. I'm sorry. Finish your question.
So rather than having item drops where you have this perverse incentive where you have like players just trying to screw each other over in all these little devious ways, why not lean into like more experience debt and crazy stat damp? Like make it suck, right? Like I understand it's got to be brutal, but like the item drop is a little problematic because now you've got this mini game of everybody just like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, no, I don't know that I would agree with that. I think that the item drop is so when we're talking about the phase in which players really are going to be using the corruption system, it's more likely going to be near the end game of their player progression, where the biggest wheel that they're traversing, right, is the itemization wheel. And what that means is the biggest risk that they have on their character is not necessarily experience debt. If you're at end game, I'll go grind that shit off. Now that's not to say they shouldn't have experience debt. That also accompanies it. But if we're talking about what is really a decision point for me to go corrupt, that I could lose my gear, my most highly sought after thing, and it's random. I don't know if it's going to be my weapon. I don't know if it's going to be my shoes. I don't know if it's going to be an earring, right? There is an RNG element to the risk. So when I roll the dice, I'm really rolling the dice. And that penalty should be severe because what you're doing is you're taking away the opt-in PvP choice of the opponent and you're murdering them and you're giving them that experience debt and they're losing their material in their inventory. So really, I want the risk to be extreme. And the most extreme is itemization. So I don't think we should take that away. But I do think that when you're talking about things like bugs, when you're talking about, corruption baiting, those things need to be identified. They need to be identified clearly with repro steps. Our internal QA is constantly focusing on those things, and that shouldn't wait until the next milestone. Those are high ticket bugs that we need to address on a severity 0 or severity 1 basis, which means that it gets moved up to the top of the sprint. And as we continue to have those issues, the PC team, the player character team, or player combat team, is always focused on trying to identify those corruption baiting issues or those corruption bugs, because it is the most detrimental to player progression, which are the bugs we care about the most.
Okay.
Just as a quick insert, one of those bugs is dropping out of an event and turning into without like any time out system before dropping the event, which will allow dots to let the character burn and they'll go corrupt when they drop the event. So that is one of those bugs. So
right,
hopefully that can get fixed.
Adam? Where's Adam, my action item?
So
Adam, that's an action item. I'm sure we have the bug logged, but we need to see its priority and when it's getting addressed.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. And then I guess I was just thinking you touched on it a bit where some of the penalties with corruption doesn't really matter at level 50 or your max level or whatever. So potentially having corruption not have like stat dampening, but like actual XP loss could be a thing, or just having a justice system in general. Like Tibia had a justice system, like who's hostile, who's playing, who's defensive, and that can create just a more civil interaction for anti-griefing, I think, in my opinion.
Well, the justice system is intending to be occupied in the design space you're talking about there by the bounty hunter system.
Mhm.
So that is intending to fulfill that role from a design space perspective. As it relates to those bugs that we're talking about, yeah, after this, if you guys have a list of what bugs are still outstanding, I'll follow up with the QA team and make sure that they're, and being included in our fast follow patch that's scheduled for the 18th.
So, obviously long term, right? Item loss. I think everybody can get on board long term, but not to beat the dead horse, but
Oh,
the
you're okay.
victims,
There's a lot of dead horses.
Yes, yes. The victims of this are not like the hardcore corruption gank or evil players. Like I've just seen so many video clips of just random noobs getting owned by this. So,
but you're talking about bugs, right?
yes, but it's one of those things where it's like I feel like you're almost temporarily making it really difficult on yourself because the golden cohort of like people that can swallow that, because I've seen like 5 people quit the game because like they accidentally one shot somebody's
100%.
mount in Winstead and the guards instantly kill them and they lose all their gear.
And that's why it should be a Sub 0 Sub 1 bug, because
Okay.
it is literally that level of a friction point. But what I'm going to say is I don't think we should be designing features around bugs. I think we should be designing features around their intended design, and the bugs that we see that hurt that loop need to be addressed quickly, especially for loops that are as progression dependent as this one with corruption. And then once we have the system in a place where it is not being infringed upon by those bugs that we're talking about, right? Then we can talk about iteration. Then we can talk about, okay, cool. How is this operating now that we don't have these bugs to deal with? Are people seeing the intended consequence of this system? If not, let's amend it. I don't have a golden calf in this design, just to be clear. And what I mean by that is, there's not something I'm looking to protect out of corruption, in its particular format. If we get those issues addressed and the design is insufficient as it relates to what we're observing on the development side and the feedback that we're receiving from our player population, our testing population, then we're going to iterate on the design. Like that is 100% going to be the case always. That's the whole purpose of our open development. We take these hits of, scam game, not ready, too early, whatever, all of that, all the shit and baggage that comes along with being in open development this long right now is we take that so we can iterate and change the designs, and we don't show up on day one of launch with a game that nobody asked for. So I'm never going to tell you that we're not going to change a system. I'm just going to tell you, let's inspect when the system is operating as intended.
Cool. And then just while I've got you on the line, just one simple suggestion. When the PvP flag drops, when you go from purple to not, being PvP flagged, one of the big things that happens right now, especially now that you have the summoner in the game that's got a 25-second dot, consider having that when that purple drops, put a debuff on the player where that if that person dies to that dot damage, it doesn't give corruption to the person, because that's what happens a lot, is that somebody's flag will drop off and they'll have a bunch of dots on them, and then the person that had the dots on them gets corrupted because the guy just, and it becomes this like weird calculated thing where it's like, oh, I get low, and then my flag's getting ready to drop, and then they can, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I would want to chat with the designers around how to approach that particular issue. Obviously there are things that we can do, such as deprecating the dot once the flagging goes away.
Even if they just,
or there are things that, but I don't know if that is the right choice, because first of all, I would say from a design standard perspective, I'm not sure that we will likely keep 25-second long dots. That's probably too long. I know that there's some synergy and interaction with the clerics, cleanse, and that's why it's relevant. The longer the dots that you have, the more relevant that class type becomes in group design, and all those types of things are present. But a 25-second dot is maybe
well, even the smaller dots, like I'm sure somebody in the chat will have.
Yeah, but if it's a smaller dot, then the decision point becomes on the dot user. If you're aware that using a dot can potentially kill a person and they are close to that deflagging mark, you're making a calculated risk. And is it okay for that player to make a bad choice? Should we allow players to make bad choices? I mean, that's a fundamental game design question, right? When we're talking about the extremes of itemization, specialization, can I make a glass cannon hero even though I'm going to get one shot every time I enter the battlefield? Should we let the player do that, or should we keep a base stat pass that always makes sure they're never one shot? Like, generally, we're erring on the side of higher customization options, and you can make bad builds, and there is a skill disparity between not just your ability to actually play the class, but your ability to design the class through your itemization choices. So I would say that there is some game philosophy around the choice of whether or not dots should allow corruption, as a result, or otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. That's all I had. I believe Nice is up next.
All right. Ashes of Creation is said to be a PvX game with risk versus reward and conflict over scarce resources. As of now, the game is currently just a test of out DPSing on a mob or getting that first damage tag on something. Would you consider making world bosses and perhaps some named mobs automatically flag someone as a combatant for PvP to encourage natural open world competition?
Yeah, I think we would consider that. We've talked about that for a little while, actually. And there's a few ways that you can facilitate the PvP around a particular NPC. You can either make the arena, mini lawless area where even entering that space flags you, because what happens when you have this particular design that you've advocated for, where hitting the boss is what flags you,
Yeah.
then you give an extreme advantage to the reacting team, meaning the team that's not yet flagged, but you are trying to take the boss on. They can fully set up around you without any potential for you to respond other than corruption, right? And they can prepare their alpha strike on you when the moment is worst, when you have the boss in its regen phase or, whatever. Like, so I'm usually more inclined to consider volumes, right, as defining spaces for lawlessness than I would be on hit, just for that type of interaction.
Nice.
But the volumes, absolutely.
I like that. Yeah, good answer. No follow-ups. I'm good to go. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you expand on Intrepid's intentions on settlement currency and commissions to create a better gameplay loop, as there isn't a whole lot of incentive for players to do them at this moment, especially for post-level progression? Do you think creating a player curated commission board for artisanship and other quests where players post jobs and bounties themselves to pay settlement currency or gold would be a more dynamic and immersive than the current system? For example, using buy orders for artisanship, bounties, attack and defend quests, fetch quests, etc.
Yeah, I think that that's actually some discussion that we've had on the system side for that potential. I'm not sure that it would be through directly players, right? Just any player can come in and do it. I think that what we want to do is reserve that space for organizations within the node. That's social organizations that we've talked about, or that's patron guilds that might have a guild hall within the space, or that's the religion within the node, the temple that's been identified there. Those types of institutions within the node that also have player ranking, player ladder systems associated with them are where we would likely vest the power to incorporate more player-centric buy orders and commissions as potentials, and that's part of the existing design. In addition to that, I would say that there are correlating systems that are predicated on successful adoption and completion of the player base. So when a commission comes up or when a buy order is there, right now, those systems are not fully in place. Those things include things like the node-to-node trading system. Acquiring certain resources, you may have to have 100 players complete X commission, right? Or finish this buy order in order to generate the necessary trade goods that nodes would use between each other to facilitate relationship building and alliance building or war efforts, right? There are ancillary systems that are not fully in place yet in the vision of how these types of settlement currencies and commissions or buy order quests are in place, but those are the vehicles for fueling those types of systems. And I believe that will place a greater emphasis on player adoption.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll go next. So many MMOs live or die by their end game, and with Intrepid pushing towards beta, of course, of late 2026, like what major end game systems such as like massive world PvP events, castle wars, endgame story arcs, instance dungeons, or even anything new that would be fully implemented, balanced, and ready for mass testing at beta.
What major endgame systems are going to be ready for testing by beta?
Yes.
All of them.
Wow.
In order for us to enter beta, all of those systems must be complete and testable. So by definition, that's what I would consider the word beta to mean. Now, if we're thinking about the things that I am most excited for, obviously we've done a lot of work on node sieges. There's still a lot of work left to do for node sieges, but the destruction phase of node sieges is probably going to be the one that I'm most interested in seeing. And it's not for probably the reasons you would think. It's not because I think that that particular system is going to be a lot of fun. I do think it will be, but I'm not interested because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm interested because I think it's going to be the greatest friction point we have with players. And I am going to be really keen on inspecting how players react to that friction point, how we onboard players to the expectation that their settlement is not a forever thing. Because right now their expectation is, cool, I need to choose where I'm going to lay my roots down, and that's going to be my tree forever, for back of a letter terminology, given that we have trees in the center of our settlements. But really the concept's going to be, where do I want to invest? Because I could lose that investment, right? And when I lose that investment, what's going to be my reaction? My resources that I might lose, my house that I might lose and invest in, my position within the, citizenship taxation. Like those types of things are scary when I think about them because they're kind of hardcore. It's a hardcore concept. But I'm sorry to go on and on about a part of the question that you didn't necessarily ask, but the answer to the question was easy. The beta is we're going to have everything in it. Yeah, go ahead.
The broader philosophy is like, again, like so many MMOs come out with this like grand design, and with combat, y'all, I feel like you guys nailed it. Like this alpha combat wise, like everybody that's been, even they may not like how fleshed out the game is yet, combat's always a huge staple for, it's very positive, but content is what literally the first 30 days goes from 1 million players down to 0.
Totally.
So I would rather you guys actually delay content off of the initial plan so that we can have more fleshed out content instead of just one system to do at endgame kind of thing.
So you'd rather we delay content? I'm sorry, expand on that.
I would rather you delay the second continent to focus on this continent and flesh this continent out with.
I see what you mean. So, first, it depends on the type of content we're talking about, right? Because not all verticals are assumed by the same team, right? We have a large team. We have over 250 developers now that are focused on the game. And that's not including our outsource and contractors that we currently have. If we were to include all those things, we're probably well over 320 or 330 people that are working on the project. With that being said, we have the ability to divide that up, and as we bring in outsource studios next year, and we incorporate them into our pipelines. And what a pipeline is how does a thing get made from concept to QA? How does a feature or piece of content make it into the game? Those pipelines need to be strong enough to support outside assistance, outside adoption, to come in and into our development environment. So if we're talking about the second continent, like, yes, I think most people would rather have one continent filled with great content that had a lot of time to bake and is, well made. And we agree with that 100%. But with that being said, there are ways that, again, we can leverage those outsourced studios to ensure that we're developing great content for both continents, because much of our content pipelines are built with systems that make it very repeatable. And we're building an MMO. We're not building a single player game. Not everything is bespoke that we move through in the world. A lot of the, I forgot about that. There's a thing about bespoke.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff we reuse. We have to, In order for us to build an MMORPG, we must reuse. Any MMO that's been built has been built off of that philosophy. So the effort to stand up the second continent is not going to be as great as the effort to stand up the first. That's just a fact. But with that being said, again, we're not talking about removing the second continent. We're talking
No,
about
just
whether or not the second continent
delaying
gets moved to a post launch.
Yeah,
And then
expansion or
it's a big expansion moment. It's like, oh my God, an entire second realm, is being released. Like that is actually an appealing factor of moving the second continent to post launch.
Go ahead, Zyback.
All right, so just to let the Twitch chat know, I appreciate the bravery of Steven. We were not like told we had to ask certain questions or get these questions approved. So I'm asking this question on behalf of the PvPers. This question is definitely a little nasty, but
Can I expand on that though, Zyback, just real quick? Because I don't think most people do know.
Yeah.
I don't vet any of these questions. They can ask me whatever they want to ask. If I don't feel comfortable, I'll say I'm not going to answer something. So yeah, and yes, it was crazy when I said that we should.
I appreciate
do a panel.
the bravery.
Yes, thank you. When I said that we should do this panel, I didn't even think until after we had scheduled it. I was like, boy, this is going to be a tough panel. We've got all walks of life in our interviewers, asking across the board. How am I going to, especially after a long day?
So obviously, I speak for the PvP lobby, so they've got some nasty questions. So Ashes of Creation is said to be a PvX game. However, the last few phases have included many changes that were very much anti-PvP, and many joke the game turned into a farming simulator. Many MMORPG players have severe trauma from PvP features being watered down, made irrelevant, or entirely removed over time. While this upcoming patch does seem to be PvP friendly on its surface, many are concerned that the PvP features will inevitably be watered down or trivialized over time. How much PvP in general, relative to what we've seen thus far in the game, do you expect moving forward? More, less, or about the same as we've seen in the past?
So let me contain the rage that you cannot see above the surface from that question.
It's a nasty one.
I know. It's okay. No, I'm just kidding. I don't have any rage. Listen, the reality of it is that anybody who's heard me speak about the design philosophy of Ashes understands that PvX is equal parts PvP and PvE. That is just that's the simple truth of the game's philosophical tenets. I've talked about this before. A designer can curate an experience up the wazoo, and it will never have the volatility that a human mind has between what is possible and what a state tree can derive. So at the end of the day, when we're talking about the types of risk you can experience, PvP risk is the most spontaneous, it's the most unpredictable, it's the most emotionally involved. All of those things are good in a PvX design. We want those things, right? At the same time, when you're talking about how do I build value, how do I build up the world? What is the importance in order to perform in PvP on the PvE player? There is a synergy and a symbiosis there between the population that likes to be sharks and the population that is, for lack of a better term, a minnow. And you need to separate those play spaces to a degree. A lot of our designs are opt-in. A lot of the events that have PvP-centric, elements to it are you choosing to go to that area, you choosing to be a part of that event, you opting into this particular guild. Those are choices that you as a player, you get to make those choices. But as the backdrop against the entire world is that open world flagging system, which again is not predominant in how you might experience, corruption from people who are just going to murder you outright. That's very, very, very rare. So to some degree, there has to be, again, harmony between those two systems. Going forward, more or less or about the same. To answer that question, we are going to have equal parts PvP and PvE. And the statement, the preface, the context that you gave to this question, you say that to a PvP player, they're going to say, yeah, Zybeck's right, this is true, that happened. You say it to a PvE player, they're going to say, that's bullshit, there's so much PvP in this game, it's unbelievable, right? Like, how do I know the decisions I'm making are right? Both the PvP players and the PvE players are bitching. If that's true,
Yeah.
it's likely we found the sweet spot right in the middle. If everybody agrees with one another, then we've probably done something wrong. It's time to look around and say, you know, have you ever played a game of Secret Hitler? It's like everybody voted in favor of this policy. Oh shit, there's a fascist in the group.
Wait a minute. Doesn't that
Yeah.
mean you've achieved enlightenment? Both PvE and PvE, or PvP and PvE are hitting that PvX?
No, we want people to have something to complain about. That's how you know you've made a good deal.
Yeah, I guess the
Typical
concern,
gamers.
the concern that the PvPers have is that they've just sort of seen features that used to exist and the way things used to be, just sort of like brick by brick get taken away in a lot of contexts, and
Yeah.
they have PTSD from the other MMOs like
And
New
rightfully
World,
so.
which
Rightfully
is literally
so.
like they changed the game after the
Yeah.
alpha.
Look,
So
you're
like
stating you're stating the premise for why Intrepid was founded.
okay.
We're not making decisions off of market data and what acquires the most amount of users and how can we appeal to the greatest audience and how do we defeat, you know, Final Fantasy 14 and build the next WoW and the Guild Wars 2. Like, that was not our mission statement. Our mission statement is we see a hole in the market for the MMORPG genre, a design hole. What is that design hole? It's a truly PvX game, a non-faction based, guild driven, friend driving, you know, massively multiplayer, predicated on player action and having agency over the world building component, and PvP is around the corner and PvE is the most relevant accomplishment that you can have to build the world and acquire the things you want. Those two dynamics are what is synergistic in a PvX design. And I'm not going to say that there's not a great PvX game out there. I played a lot of great PvX games, but there is an opportunity, I think, to bring the systems depth that we are trying to bring here with Ashes of Creation into the fold while also having that PvX design element and philosophy. That's what I think is missing. A broad spectrum systems depth MMO with the PvX philosophy. And that's the space I think Ashes fills. Now, is it going to be the largest space? No, it's not. It will not be the largest space. By the simple fact that we have PvP in the game, we will cut out a large portion of the MMORPG market share. That is just a truth. We're okay with that because we believe that the market share that's interested in our PvX design is large enough to sustain the project, right? Obviously to sustain the project and be very profitable, I think. So, you know, at the end of the day, that's our mission statement. And so long as I retain 100% creative control of the product, that is going to be the case.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Or nice.
All right. Some players don't feel much connection to their settlement. They're feeling that settlement attachment is missing, and we're seeing players switch settlements often. What future plans do you have to make players feel more connected to / invested in their settlement and its success?
Okay, feel more connected and invested in their settlement and its success. That is a great question.
It is.
I think that there are a lot of systems, you know, polished systems, accompanying systems that are still outstanding for node design, as we know. A lot of the things I just talked about with the commissions and buy orders, you know, being handled by the social organizations, the religious organizations, and the patron guilds components, like those types of things induct players into their pseudo faction. You might call settlements. Settlements are a pseudo faction. We're a non-faction based game, but we have a lot of pseudo factions in it, right? Those organizations I talked about, settlements in and of themselves, guilds that you choose to be a part of, you know, those are all pseudo factions because you're not tied to them eternally. You can leave them at a given point and make a new decision, but when you're a part of them, you depend on the success of your peers within that location or within that organization. So I think doubling down on introducing those additional features to the settlement system will add to players feeling invested. I think having the threat of loss and just having investment, right? Investment intrinsically contains the opportunity for loss, Right now, there is no opportunity for loss, so it's not an investment. By making it an investment and knowing you can lose that thing and that the investment required your time and your effort and your resources to benefit you in the long run, you now become more interested in its success because its success is not a sure thing. That's a central philosophical tenet. So by making it an investment, you will curry more interest and dedication and commitment, because players ultimately pursue power. And so long as that investment can return power, or there are players that pursue immersion, that pursue,
Influence.
influence. Exactly. Thank you. And again, the settlement system is intended to be a vehicle for all of those things. And so long as that vehicle then becomes not a sure thing, you're going to be interested in its survival and success.
Nice.
So, kind of building off the settlement, uh, just sentiment, is mitigating guilds from controlling multiple settlements still a primary focus for Intrepid, or has player behavior changed design intention over the past year? Are castles intended? Oh my gosh, are castles intended? Yeah, exactly.
Like
Are castles intended to be the main driver for top guilds to fight over freeing the settlements of their control?
Okay. Let's see. Do we have that question updated? Okay. Mitigating guilds from the controlling multiple. Yes. Okay. So to answer the first part of the question, is it a focus for us to mitigate guilds exerting control over multiple settlements? The answer is yes. Now, will we be successful in fully mitigating that? The answer is no. What mitigation means is we want to make it difficult, right? So that, it's not impossible, but it is very difficult to do. And especially the larger the settlement is. That I think is a key component, because the larger the settlement is, the more influence and power it contains. So that's a scaling problem. And we want to make sure that all the mitigation factors that make it more difficult for guilds to exert this multi-settlement pressure scales with that power and influence. So if a guild were to focus on, let's say, controlling potentially 2 smaller, less influential, less trafficked settlements, that is more achievable, but still very difficult to do. So to answer your second part of your question, has player behavior changed design intention? No, they have not. So that is still our intention. Our castle is intended to be the main. I'm sorry. Give me one second.
The main driver for top guilds.
Okay, give me one sec.
Okay.
Got it. Okay, sorry about that. So our castle is intended to be the main driver for the top guilds to fight over, bring settlements of their controls. The answer to that is two-part. Yes, castles are still intended to be the hold on, I'm sorry. I just got a cool DM from S-Fan. S-Fan, brother!
Let's go.
He's asking if I want to do a Q&A tomorrow with his stream.
Do it.
I would love to chat with you and your community, brother.
Dude, I can't wait for that one.
Doing it live.
Thank you, Steven. That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. So to answer that question, castles will absolutely be an objective of guilds. They will be the primary objective of guilds. They will be the most influential and powerful trophy that a guild can acquire. And so, how do you precipitate human behavior? It's through reward. In that sense, reward will be the top objective. Will that address or free their control over settlements? I don't think so. I think that is a separate vertical of power and influence. They will house and contain 2 different reward structures. And as a result, guilds will pursue both. However, again, the settlement will have fail safes as it relates to mitigating that control overall. Why am I getting blown up in Discord right now? I apologize, everybody. Okay, Esvin says, cool, let's do it. Very excited to chat with you in your
Nice.
community tomorrow, Esvan. Okay, next question. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So I have one, Steven, because coming as a PvE player myself, primarily from World of Warcraft, I've actually really enjoyed the PvX dynamic, just saying. But caravans are a huge topic right now. And caravans brought some really epic PvP moments and a lot of group fun in phases 1 and 2. But with the crate systems release and the safer mule transport on the horizon, players are skipping them as they're being too risky, low reward. What tweaks like speed buffs, better loot splits, any anti-griefing tools that are planned potentially for early access or even further beyond for caravans? Make them great again, Steven.
Make them great. Make caravans great. Okay, so this is another byproduct of having outstanding feature support done here. Now, I agree with you. Caravans inhabit an entirely separate play space. These are roaming open world battlegrounds, essentially, that should have a high investment, high reward profile. And right now, that is being usurped by the introduction of the crate system and the introduction of mules. Always, again, an intended design to have those things, but what often happens in development, because we want to test a feature as soon as possible in order to potentially iterate it as quickly as necessary, or experience whatever downfalls and issues that it might have that would inform later systems that accompany it. We introduced the Caravan without all of its necessary components and feature sets, and we introduced the crate system and mule system without all of its corresponding features. So now what we've done is we've identified a current state delinquency, so to speak, in the game design. So I was having a conversation with Chris Justo, who is our principal systems designer, and we were talking about expediting some of the plans for supporting caravans in the design space. And I would expect not by this month, but by next milestone that you will see some revisioning of the Caravan system. But in addition, you'll see some additional feature support to ensure that caravans once again take their space within the roaming, open world, high risk, high reward battleground space.
Yeah, I think y'all did some great improvements with the UI, with like the tagging of the going purple. Like it kind of is a shame that people aren't running them. So I'm
Agreed.
great answer to your question.
Agreed. And I'm just going to set this expectation with any viewer right now that the ebb and flow you just described with caravans were great, and then they were not great. Will they be great again? The answer is yes, they will. And that ebb and flow may exist for other systems and features as well. Right? Like that is just a reality of being in active development. Is
Being an
that
alpha.
exactly and I know the age old meme of it's just an alpha, bro. But within each meme is a little bit of truth, and and there is truth in the sense that being an alpha means that not all of these systems are in place, right? And because we're so systems heavy and systems interdependent, that means that shit can feel a little lackluster. Um, Now, you may not like the fact that we're still in alpha. You may think that we should be done with the game by now. And to you, sir, I tip my hat. And if you can create a game of this complexity in a faster amount of time with a similar degree of quality, I will play that game. But what I will tell you is that we're taking our time to ensure that we execute accurately.
I'd rather have my food cooked well than cooked fast. Just saying.
Yes.
All right. Time to kill is very controversial on the PTR. A lot of people think it's too fast, while others say it's fine. What do you guys intend the rough time to kill to be in PvP? But more importantly, what scale of PvP gets priority when it comes to combat pacing?
So TTK and balancing stats will likely be a thing we do until literally the week before commercial launch. That is just a reality. because we're going to get feedback constantly. We're going to find locations, builds, equipment combinations that need to be revised. And we're building a very complex, highly customizable, player character progression system that is going to be difficult to balance. Now, because of that, our balance objective is group v group. We've talked about that in the past. We are not intending to have a 1v1 balance situation. I know that we recently did a 1v1 competition on the PTR with some of the balance revisions. Don't let that be indicative to you of what we're trying to balance against. What we are trying to do is mitigate the width of the spectrum, right, between what TTK is in PvE environments, what it is in raid v raid, what it is in group v group, and what it is in 1v1. And while our target objective in balance is group v group, we do take into consideration the extremes of 1v1 and raid v raid. They are important as well, because we want to make sure that while we find the average being group, that those two extremes aren't too far apart. Earlier, I had told you that how do I judge reception from the community? I was asked this question by Jacob, who's our director of production, about a month ago. Once I had come back from my second surgery, and I was out for about 2 weeks, and that was during the time where the stat balance pass was happening, and I wasn't able to be a part of those discussions. And when I came back, I had given some revisions that needed to be made. And Jacob said, "What's your metric for success, in the stat balance approach?" And we were talking about surveys that we were conducting and polls that we were holding for, TTK being too fast or too slow. And I said, if I see a survey come back from our testers that has, 25% think it's way too slow, 25% think it's way too fast, and 40% feel it's just right, with the rest being in between, like, I would consider it successful. So if I have half the people telling me that it's way too fast and the other half of the people telling me that it's way too slow, I consider us having hit a good balance mark to some degree. And I think that the latest iteration of stat passing with TTK is actually in a pretty good spot. Probably, now I know this is subjective, and again, half the people are going to say I agree with you, half the people are going to say I disagree with you, but I would say it's probably in the best spot that we've had so far. But we will continue to refine it and continue to adjust it, as I said, even in beta.
Okay.
I agree. It is currently in the best spot that it's been so far.
I just want to say this one small thing. Inner Fire and Ward has been a huge topic of contention as far as people like being that problematic. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but
which one? I'm sorry, I was reading something.
The Inner Fire passive in the weapon skill tree and Ward in the weapon skill tree.
Okay.
Those have been pretty problematic for players.
Meaning that they're too powerful?
Yes.
Yeah. I know that of the skill trees, the weapon skill trees are the ones most needing revision, iteration, and auditing.
100%.
Yeah.
Those were done in a very quick, more, initially they were done super copy pasta, right? Copy pasta. But we spent a little bit of time getting them up and better to a degree. But really, they're going to be most needing that audit, and I would expect to see a significant revision of those skill trees. It's not going to be immediate. It's not likely going to be in the next milestone as well. We'll see how that ends up in a prioritization pass. I would expect it probably in next year's second milestone.
Nice. All right.
When do we get more weapons? I see from Savage Logic in chat. You will be happy to know that in addition to the one-handed spear, my next desired weapon is staffs.
Staff, yes.
Nice.
So, let's go.
Yeah, so
All
you
right.
will likely see me rolling around on the 11th with a GM staff. So let that be a little bit of a preview. But yeah.
Nice. All right. You've stated that this wouldn't be a Zerg game, or rather that there will be things to prevent it from being such, lack of fast travel and guild tree powers being used as examples. However, many players feel this isn't enough. The guild tree to incentivize smaller numbers in exchange for some bonuses is lackluster in comparison to just having more members, and most guilds just go to the sub guild route like Syndicate 1, Syndicate 2, Syndicate Yellow, etc., in an effort to double dip. What are plans to help further empower smaller guilds or groups to combat large mega Zerg guilds potentially dominating open world content too much, such as the upcoming Harbinger system?
Well, I think that one thing that hasn't been, one big thing that hasn't been introduced as part of our event design is properly segregated objectives. And what I mean by that is, you may have certain objectives that are easily zergable, right? Like downing a boss in an open environment, or controlling a control point. Those things are obviously lend themselves to being zergable. But what some types of objectives that might be even instance-based, only allowing a group to perform, and then that objective can confer a very powerful buff to one side in an event, potentially, based on the outcome of that head-to-head. I think arguably favors smaller, tight-knit groups that are more accustomed to working in synchronicity with one another. And that can also play into the types of objectives that may not just be damage output, because if you have a Zerg that's completing content in the open world, they're also likely going to be the most wealthy and have the best equipment. But more skill predicated objective types that are within those types of instances. I think ultimately, if I were to define the design goal in creating those types of objective-based gameplays, that would be what I would communicate to my design team, incorporating those elements for smaller based groups. In addition, the way that we've centralized the power reward from guild structures, right? Being within the skill design, acquisition, potentially within, castles and or guild halls, and how you sectionalize the roster of a guild to have certain benefits conferred only to those rosters, right? Like one example that I've given is, you may have the primary guild core group that can only facilitate 40 people, and then you may have a squadron or a knight block that has the next 10 people you can invite, and so on and so forth. And there may be deprecated reward profiles for those groups. So as you broaden the size of your guild, choosing to invest your points in the progression within guild expansion, not only are you foregoing the skills that you would normally have acquired down the path of non-expansion, which is another balancing point to Zergs, because the smaller guilds will have an opportunity to invest their skill points through guild progression within passive benefits and buffs that confer to the primary block. But you're getting a diminished return on how many people within the guild can actually benefit from those when you segregate them into separate groups. So I think, the combination of that event design with the design of the organization progression lends itself to mitigating, but not fully removing the Zerg element. If the objective is to fully remove the Zerg element, that is not a possibility. We should all be clear about that. When you have a multiplayer game that is open world and non-faction based and has open world content in it, all you can do is mitigate and make a steeper incline. And that's our objective. That is, and that's going to level the playing field to a degree, but ultimately in a multiplayer massively game, numbers will matter to some degree. Numbers are really people. Soylent Green is people. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
But no, the numbers is really people. And if you have more people that are working towards a common goal and a common effort, there has to be some consideration to that, because it is a multiplayer open world environment. And there are consequences. Now, what do we do with that knowledge as a design team? We don't just sit back and say, yes, let the pigs rule the farm, so to speak. What we do is we create incentive structures to sow division. because the larger the organization, even through an alliance of guilds, when you can create scarcity in your reward profiles and objectives that cannot be shared by everyone, then greed takes over, because greed is an inherent human quality. And we should leverage inherent human qualities like greed in order to facilitate potential change in power structures. How many of us have played in MMOs where the strongest organization had dissension from within, where it erupted, the guild imploded because of that dissension, or an
Like
alliance?
Ashes?
Exactly. That is the type of political intrigue that, as designers, we don't need to force. We need to incentivize. We need to create those friction points where players can do what players are naturally going to do anyways. That's the whole point of designing a game like this.
Have you guys ever considered like actual like mechanics like that are like, imagine like a mage lightning skill where the more targets it bounces to, the more damage it does? Like actual harder mechanics, like maybe if there's a group of 40 people, they're on the map visible, like things like that, or do you not want to do that kind of stuff? Do you not want to have
where we're showing player possession on the
yeah, like
battlefield?
imagine you have a group of 40. Like if you have a group that big, you're just visible on the map. Like people can just hit M and see where you're at, and then you
Albion
have
style.
like skills that are inherently anti-zerg.
I don't think the problem is fielding 40 people. I think even the small guilds
Just as an example.
I know, but I'm just going to use that. Like a design like that will actually, in my opinion, benefit the Zergs. Right? I don't think it would benefit the smaller skilled, the smaller groups or organizations. But to answer your question, within that vein of thinking, yes, we have thought about designs that help bridge the divide between the player numbers and the skill level, because ultimately that's the question here: is skill level better than numbers? Is numbers better than skill?
Would that be something like giving the fighter or tank an ability to clump a group in order to create like more of like a bomb squad against the Zerg or something like that?
From an ability design, yes. From an ability design perspective, ability design perspective, absolutely. Like that's, having the ability to, co-locate groups of people or targets within AoE distances, AoE build types like if you think about a raid composition and how you can spec your class right now. Like raid composition now becomes a strategy as a result of the Zerg dilemma. Like how you spec your build when you have access to those types of AoE abilities becomes a strategic decision in a tactical environment. And we do want to create that type of dilemma.
Cool. All right. So my question is around vertical and horizontal progression in general. So just to frame it, there's not a whole lot of meaningful character progression. Like me as my player, I don't really feel like I'm progressing my character. A lot of it is locked behind certificates or like level brackets. Like every 10 levels, I get my big power boost. Every time I hit my level 10, my level 20, I get that big increase in gear. Now I'm really strong in this particular level bracket. Does Intrepid plan on addressing this as an issue, or does it not really see it as an issue? Are there like plans on like archetypes having individual scalings? How do you intend to fix or combat this?
Well, I think there's a few outstanding, features and content loops that are missing from the character progression model that's currently in game. Right now, the economy is as you state, is the primary method of power acquisition. But we are missing things like more fully fleshed out guild trees with power passives. We are missing more passive options within the current skill trees for the archetypes. We're missing an entire class selection of augmentation to further reinforce non-itemized, character progression. We're missing the social organizations. We're missing the all of the intended relics that are in the world and confer power and benefits to players. Some of the policies for nodes and the benefits that come from your housing progression. Like there are non-itemization based, non-gearing based progression paths that are still outstanding. And I think that when we have the full picture of that design in place, your character progression is going to feel perhaps the opposite that it does now, which is that I must pay attention to too many systems in order to optimize my power progression curve. Like that is the flip side of this problem. Right now, it's all centrally focused on gear. And the question of the design is going to be, does having 6 different vertical paths that need to be focused on too much to onboard players? And so we'll see. We'll see when those things make it in, how we need to tune it.
So just like philosophically speaking about vertical power progression, at the high, like what's your curve looking like on the high end? Because one of the complaints I've seen is that like the epic and the legendary, you just get a huge return on just general power, and a lot of people are like, maybe that bump going from heroic to epic to legendary should be much lower than it is, because people are sort of concerned that the veteran players are just going to start blowing all the other people out of the water, like because there's just so much power in those. Like is there an intention for there to be a drop off, like a strong diminishing return on that?
So let me answer the first part of that question. Again, we're going to be tuning things repeatedly.
Yeah.
And whether or not the level of disparity between those various rarities is what we're going to stick with is predicated on player feedback and the data that we collect right now in time to kill, power acquisition snowball, like all of those things, inform decisions we make around this stuff. So to answer your question on the pursuit, that's that division, which is, how strong is too strong, but how strong is necessary to elicit interest, right? To elicit, like if I have to invest $1 million gold and getting 1%, how many players are really going to do that? And how impactful is that $1 million gold now becoming? That's a significant diminishing return. If that $1 million gold, gives me a 10% edge, that wheel becomes far more enticing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's tough.
So that's a balance that, we can really only inform by data collected from the feedback of the players and the testing, of our current numbers. And all I can tell you is that we're going to massage it until it hits a happy medium of investment by the players.
I can, for my question, I just want to preface, because it kind of really leads into my question. There was a huge problem in phase 2 with basically epics and legendaries, Steven, being common. They were very common. Now, static rarity was a huge predicate to them being super common across the board, right? But now that that's fully removed, during PTR testing, I've wrote Reddit threads. I've talked to a couple of devs already about this. It's still an issue, in my opinion. Every PTR, even with a crew tool, a common novice tool, I can literally find an epic and legendary within 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and everybody in my guild can also do that. So if I can do that, everybody in my guild can do that. Epic and legendaries are going to remain the common gearing. Everybody's going to have that. So for my question, so what is currently intended that legendary gatherables can drop when using just a basic novice tool? Or do you feel that higher rarity materials should require upgrading your tools to better rarities to harvest? So actual progression. Because if you can get legendaries with a common tool, why would I ever need to upgrade it?
Yeah, I mean, what happens? So, what you're describing is adding additional throttle to the higher rarity introduction into the system, right?
I want epics and legendaries to be that, like epic and actual legendaries, for them to be really exciting.
Yeah, your end goal is scarcity. You believe that the scarcity value, however reached, whether it be through, not gatekeeping on the progression of tools, but just adjust. You're advocating for gatekeeping on the acquisition of tools, which is okay. That's a valid design path. And just outright, I would say we aren't necessarily opposed to it. We've discussed that internally as well. Mm-hmm. But there are other ways to achieve the end goal of higher scarcity. You could reduce the overall spawn rate or proc rate of these higher rarities.
Yeah, and that's what I want.
You could predicate it off of skill tree progression. You could predicate it off of tool quality. You know, however way you introduce the throttle, the end goal is to reduce scarcity of those things.
Right.
Scarcity as a value is a variable that will be tuned.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It is something that we need to find the happy medium for. Your supposition is that right now there's too many legendaries.
Oh, well, that's everybody was decked out in them, and even in phase 3.
But I'm talking about in PTR right now with the revamp that we've done.
Well, yes. Like we're still finding legendaries pretty commonly, or epics, and again, I'm not opposed for a common tool achieving or even getting an epic or legend, but that should be like a 1 out of a million. Like it should be, you know, very rare that could possibly happen, right? Like, and that's why upgrading your tools, or again predicating rarity power or something, because I know stats in Artisan is still being adjusted to.
Sure,
like that's all in flux, right? I totally get it. But I guess for me, as someone who truly fell in love with gathering, processing, crafting, and ashes, I want my efforts to matter. And I feel like prior they were invalidated by static rarity, but now I feel like there's just no point in me upgrading. And also like the stats just need a huge rework. Like speed is terrible. Spoils is great. I feel like there's some stats that are really good, some stats that just, you know, we need some work. But I think what I'm crying out is just for progression and for like when I see someone actually in a legendary piece, or they have a legendary, that's like, oh wow, like holy crap, you must have worked really hard for that.
Yeah, and again, like that value is something that is not only subjective. So if I have half the people agreeing with you and half the people disagreeing with you, we probably hit a happy medium. And what I would just say is that when we're targeting how we balance these systems, you know, the player feedback is obviously the validation point, and this is going to continue to be tuned. It is just such a highly tunable thing.
I'm actually going to change the order because my question fits into his question. Item destruction. What's the plan with item destruction? Speaking of legendary items, if these items go away and they have, you know, a lifespan, maybe that would help too. And we haven't really heard anything about them being.
So I did have a conversation again to reiterate the design path here. That deconstruction is intended to be a necessary component of crafting, meaning that unique materials can only be derived from deconstruction of items, right? So if I want to build a sword, and you know, let's just say it's you know, the dragon sword or something, I will need molds that I derive from deconstructing other sword types. Now that's intended to be an itemization sink, obviously. And there could be a variable informed by your profession expertise, your tools, the station that you're deconstructing at, and the node invests in giving you higher quantities or higher rarities of those deconstructed materials to then inform the crafting component of it. Like all of that is again going to be interconnected.
My question was more on, like, let's say Vladis makes me a legendary sword. Mm-hmm. When will that break? Like, when will I need to get another one? There's not really any item destruction, because I know you've talked about it in the past, where it's like you have to have the stuff getting destroyed or else it's not going to have demand. Is that still intended to be a thing?
Well, the stuff being destroyed is through deconstruction. Now, those same deconstruction, so originally durability, when I discussed as a system,
I guess that's my question.
Yeah. Durability, which is separate from deconstruction. Durability is the, you know, life force of the item. When originally I had the design where if the item reached half durability, it would be considered a broken state, and that would have diminished stats. And if it goes down to 0, it cannot be equipped, right? You don't lose the item, but it cannot be equipped. To repair the item, you must have original resources used in the item's creation, right? And that would include deconstructed elements, deconstructed components that come from other swords. So there is a sink in the economy for items that may be dropped, you know, from mobs, might be low quality, you know, whatever, to get those deconstructed materials, which are then used both in the creation of new items that might be higher quality or more unique through mats received through drops and raids and, you know, potential trade. And they would be at higher quality because they're crafted as well. That is the, you know, original design.
And that's still the intent for items to eventually totally run out of juice and just be spent. Because like right now, one of the concerns is like, well, I get all my best
right now
gear.
it's just gold. Right now you're just we're paying money for deconstruction.
Well, I just meant like let's say I get my final super awesome best in slot item. The concern is that what do I do now? Like there's no more demand. So eventually that item will die. Long term or no?
No, I don't think we would ever have the item die.
Okay.
I think the item can be repaired through the efforts that
Okay.
Yeah.
And that will be enough to fuel the crafting of. You think? I guess.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That was the concern I guess the crafters had, is that like once everybody gets all their best stuff, what do I do now?
No, because again, repairing is the avenue for the sink. Tempering also is derived from deconstruction components, as is the crafting. The item doesn't ever need to be destroyed. If you allow it to get to 0 durability without repairing it, and we don't know necessarily if we're going to require material component cost to repair the item unless it's at 0. So it might just continue to be gold when it's above 0. But if you ever let the item get to 0 and break, then it could require the material components in order to repair. But the item won't ever actually be destroyed.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Intrepid has sold a lot of pre-order cosmetics over the years, some of which has already been delivered to players and will continue to be delivered in batches. With the cosmetics cash shopping coming, how would you address players concerned about Intrepid selling new character cosmetics before delivering on the previous one sold and not delivering on the pre-order shop currency yet?
Look, at the end of the day, we are trying to bring Ashes to life, and doing so on the back of just pre-orders and one-man shoulders is a difficult task. We are a company, and as much as I want to see this game come to fruition, and as much as I've invested in it, we should be taking advantage of those of us in the community who are willing to support this project for its vision, for the progress that we've made, an avenue to do so. That is good. It is healthy for the game. We want that to happen. The question about completing the earlier cosmetics, a lot of those are going to be entitled when the game enters early access. We have a lot of the costumes ready to go from an entitlement perspective. Players who purchase those costumes will have access to those costumes as well as to some of the mount skins. So many of those things are done, and we will be prioritizing their creation in lieu of new cosmetics that will be available when we enter into early access. So our priority is to complete those.
Okay.
We will be doing that. But we will have a small selection of available cosmetics for the new players who can choose to support the game and the project by participating in those cosmetics. I believe that the best possible MMO RPG environment that is both sustainable for the company, has a balance for user acquisition, right, without a super big upfront box price cost, and is sustainable and respects the integrity of the player, is no box price with a subscription that's $15 a month and a microtransaction market that is cosmetic only.
Yeah.
That is my philosophy. There is no right or wrong to this philosophy. I'm just going to be honest with you. There is none. Somebody could say that that's bullshit, and I don't think there should be a sub, and it should just be a box price with no microtransactions, and their opinion is just as valid as mine, and that's okay. Again, we're talking about market share. So how many in the market are okay with cosmetics and just a subscription price with no box price? I believe a healthy enough population to support the game. And I believe that that's the best environment for us to stay true to the integrity of the player's accomplishment, not be debated down the path of pay to win or pay to convenience items, and sustain regular updates to the live service. Now, that is from my knowledge as a developer and the owner of the company. So that is up to each of their own to make their own opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I think that's what most of the community concern was seeing those new cosmetics come. But you guys are delivering on those pre-order cosmetics sold years ago. So yeah, okay, it's good.
I was actually thinking about it yesterday. I was like, it actually is pretty rare for an MMO to not have any sort of pay to win, like buying currency
Yeah.
from
Or
the
a
develop.
market
Like,
in general.
you can't even. I can't even
There's
really
no
think of
MMO
one
that doesn't have a cash shop.
or
Every MMO
I
has
know,
a cash shop.
I know.
like you almost, and you have to make all the caveats of it's like it's not pay to win. It's just more convenient. Like it's very
Right.
rare to see like with what Ashes is
Well,
doing where there's none except you get to look pretty. Like
I
that's it.
agree. I think that, and to be fair, if I were to verbalize the criticisms that I've seen from people who take odds with the fact that there is a cosmetic shop, it's not so much that they're saying we don't care about having the cosmetic shop, it's that they don't like seeing the cosmetic shop in alpha. And the reality of it is that we are not a traditionally built MMORPG. We are, to some degree, a crowdsourced MMORPG. There is support that you are giving to the company to fulfill the obligations of the project, and to help bring the project to life. That is also a fact. And it is totally valid not to like that fact. You can go on believing that the best products are made by multi-billion-dollar corporations or publishers who have historically produced these games in a non-crowdsourced fashioned way. And that is a valid thing to do. Some of the best games that I've played are developed that way. But if we're talking about innovation and we're talking about risk taking, the crowdsource path, albeit one fraught with danger for projects that don't come to fruition, and we recognize that stigma, requires the support of a community in order to see some of these wilder ideas get the light of day, be actually greenlit. Most boardrooms of these multi-billion-dollar publishers or development studios go where the market data says to go. And that means making either a WoW clone or a Guild Wars 2 clone or a Final Fantasy clone. And I have no problem playing those games. I love those games. I would play those games every day. I historically have. But if we want to do something different, it takes some adoption by a community. And that is the truth. You don't need to be part of that audience. That's totally cool, but don't shit on the people who want to be a part of that audience. That's their right and choice. And if they believe that that's the best way to bring a product like this to life, and they're along for that journey, cool. We'll have you. We want you. Join us.
Cosmetics are the end game.
You kind of already answered this question a little bit ago. It was regarding weapon skill trees. They're kind of copy pasta, and so it kind of creates like an illusion of choice with those. So I was wondering if that was a balancing issue or a design issue, but it seems like it's more so that it's just not fully developed. So instead of
Correct,
asking that question, there's been a lot of discussion around what a hardcore player and a casual player can do, and that Ashes is straying away from being a casual friendly game. Are there any gameplay loops or systems that are being designed or introduced with the casual player in mind? For example, sport fishing and arenas are good form of like short-term content, but not all encompassing of like all different types of play styles. Are there more designs with shorter game time casualness involved?
So I think that from a design perspective, in an MMORPG, when you are thinking of introducing a feature or a piece of content, you ask yourself two questions. What do I do with this piece of content when I have an hour to play? And what do I do with this piece of content when I have 10? Right? And we're talking about play sessions here. We're talking about play sessions specifically. And as a design team, if you can answer that question in a way that feels satisfying in both scenarios, you've succeeded. So when we're talking about the systems you mentioned, like fishing, right? Or we're talking about gathering, or we're talking about crafting and componentizing those systems so that you can make slow progress. Those are things that whether I log in for the hour or not, like I have the ability to either make progress that ends in the culmination of a completion event within that hour, right? It could be a completion of a step along a grand reveal, but it has to feel like I'm completing something, right, within that play session. that's how we try to architect all of our features. Now, the flip side of that coin is not just the feeling of the gameplay, but it is the power acquisition, because ultimately, at the end of the day, power, influence, those are the reasons we play these games in a social system. We want to achieve those things. Immersion, role play, that's along the way, right? And they can play into that to some degree. But that is the ultimate pursuit. How do we balance the 10-hour day against the 1-hour day? And again, this is another point where I would say mitigation is the objective, elimination is not the point. You cannot do that in a progressive game. It is not possible to do that and still respect the time of the player. Because when you have people who are dedicating 16 hours a day to this game, they need to feel like those 16 hours were spent meaningfully against the person who spends the hour. And that requires progression along a vertical path in some cases, but horizontally as well, right? Some of that power progression doesn't have to feel always vertical. It can be options. It can be a breadth of responses. It can be my reaction capabilities. That is an important design philosophy. So we try to lean in there as well. In the way that we confer power. It's not just about the vertical outgoing, system. It is also about how you have the capability to respond.
As a dad, as a person that has 3 kids and only has 2 to 3 hours, that's the majority of my Ashes gameplay per day. I like that. I do. Like, I don't care that the person that's playing 16 hours a day is way ahead of me, because I still feel like what I'm doing in my little small time matters to me. I mean, it may not matter to you, but it definitely mattered to me in my gameplay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also think that like arenas, battlegrounds, they kind of like facilitate a
And
different
duels.
type of progression, which is like
Rules, yeah.
ego progression, ranking up without giving any meaningful power to the player, but giving them infinite loops of gameplay.
Absolutely.
So with my question actually goes into more PvP discussion. So we've had lawless PvP zones in the world, which is, I think, fantastic for relievers for now. But does the team still intend to have more dynamic PvX like world events, like maybe some like Capture the Flag, Oddball, King of the Hill, or even something to accommodate different player sizes, like 8v8, 16v16, 20 versus 20, or even like the first guild to sign up versus the other first guild to sign up, like something like that?
Do we intend to have those types of events?
Yeah, like just like different kind of PvX events around the world that players of both PvX and PvP can enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that the latest story arc is a good example of that, right?
Okay.
That is a lawless based environment that has competing resource acquisition, and that has an event predicated on kill completion and or boss completion, which then opens an enclosed space fraught with PvX danger, where the objective is to acquire PvE, goods at the risk of a PvP environment. So, that type of design should be intrinsic while also incorporating those objective more Zerg v small group objective design as part of the event local.
Yeah, I just feel like, killing each other's fine. It's fun and all, but it gets boring, right? So it's like having different objectives that challenge the players differently and engaging, and also considering like world boss design or just like other things in general that could really interfere or create certain restrictions that are like, oh crap, like I think that's just what makes the world feel fun and alive.
Yeah, I mean, let's think about the current Harbinger design, right? It's not just about killing.
Oh, by the way,
each other.
Harbingers the event looked awesome.
Yes, it's not just about killing each other in that design, right? Boss dynamics are important. The boss abilities create unique instances of battlefield tactic requirements when engaging enemy opponents. So tactically moving around those is important. There is a chest that is the objective acquisition point within the interior, the Narthax of the Harbinger. that players have to channel against, right? So it's a kind of a control point acquisition that becomes relevant, along with significant bottlenecking and choke points within the level design. That creates for more dynamic, raid v raid elements. There's also hidden spawned objectives that exist both within the pocket dungeon proper and around the Harbinger that smaller groups and or individual solos can go for. When we're talking about crate design, crate acquisition, crate development, and closing specific geysers within the incursion areas, those are different trade-based kind of movement-oriented objectives. So like there are non-kill based objectives. Ultimately, PvP though is player versus player. So
No, for
combat should be intrinsic in that, all of those designs.
Right.
But there are different objective points.
Right. And that's why I like the whole like capture the flag, because you're still killing people, but there's an objective to complete also.
Correct.
Right. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like I love that kind of stuff.
Yep. And capture the flag is really introduced with certain relic spawns. A relic you
Yes.
could consider a flag. Its
Yes.
base of origin that you're returning it to is obviously a settlement. And in that regard, there are intents to make sure, and there might already be relics within the Harbinger event that are sought after and then create a dynamic capture the flag type of event.
Sweet.
All right, I got a fun one.
Okay,
So-
and we got and I think we're now approaching the 2-hour
yeah,
mark.
this one, yeah,
So
this one
this-
is
so-
this one's
so-
We can
A
talk
little
about
over.
this
We
one.
can do 2 more questions. We'll do this one
Yeah.
and one more.
That's pretty easy. So, many gamers really enjoyed proximity chat in New World and most recently Arc Raiders. I know you've mentioned this in the past with taverns, but honestly, I think proximity chat in this game all around, with how social it is and the player friction, would lead to a lot of really cool moments.
I'm gonna
I
get
do,
banned on Twitch.
I
Steven.
do not think that there should be proximity chat
Oh,
everywhere.
I love it.
However, I do think that certain spaces should have proximity chat. I think that those spaces are taverns, as we've talked about in the past, within settlements. I think that they could even be taverns within freeholds, as we've talked about from a business perspective. I think that would be cool in those spaces. Even adding some attenuated volume to the proximity, that you could hear outside of the tavern. So you walk past and you just, hear people inside potentially a little bit, although they wouldn't be able to hear you. So I think that could be cool. And then obviously, a party and or raid based chat, I think is important. But no, not a full world proximity. The last thing I want to do is litter
was-
my
What if it was
immersion.
opt-in? Just
I mean,
opt-in
that
only.
would give you a real good reason to want to murder the group next to you in a dungeon.
That's player friction.
I
Player
get that.
friction.
Man.
I get that. But I think that would just be. I think that what would happen is you would have a lot of people opt out, and then the benefit of the effect, becomes I don't know. I think that'd be rough.
I'm just thinking of all the Arc Raiders clips that just make
Yeah.
either really fun gameplay or really toxic gameplay. And I think it's probably up to the player to opt in or opt out, but I think it's a cool mechanic.
But it does make you feel
I did
something.
see somebody in chat say perhaps in the open seas. Better yet, perhaps on a boat.
Note sieges.
So if you're standing on the deck of a boat, you have proximity chat. That could be interesting. That could be interesting. I don't know.
sea shanties.
You just have like propaganda boats sailing around the world, people screaming at each other.
That would be
All
interesting
right.
to test.
We ain't gonna hold you up all night. I'm gonna change the order on the last one, but you kind of touched on this one earlier, but I kind of want to get like your full thoughts on it to a certain extent. Settlement destruction, which causes a player to lose belongings and the settlement they worked so hard to build up, is not yet in game, but is a potential risk of a settlement siege. There are many players, including new ones, still unaware of this mechanic. My question is, how do you foresee the player base responding to settlement destruction? And would you be willing to compromise on its design/risk involved?
How do I see players responding to it?
Negatively.
I was going to say, I don't see a lot of them
Negatively.
saying, "Yay,
We lost.
we
It's
lost."
awesome.
Yeah, I don't think it's the loss that really we want to focus on. I think that the loss is something we need to build recovery systems around. I think that we need to build incentive systems around. I think that there are opportunities that can be found in loss that can soften the blow. I think that, we lean into that path.
Yeah.
Am I willing to compromise on node destruction?
Well, not
I
the
don't-
destruction, but rather
Oh.
the design / how much risk is involved, like losing all the materials that you had in the bank at that node / settlement.
I think that there are ways, again, to mitigate that. There might be policies that the node could adopt. So in exchange, anytime you want to give a power, you need to take a cost.
Right.
And so what you're describing is, how can I mitigate my losses? Well, you can, but it'll cost you. It may cost you one of your policy slots. It may cost you one of your build slots.
Relic
It
slots.
might cost you a relic slot. And then in that case, what you've done is you've created a countryside of options for player types. Players who may be more adverse to risk, right? Just like an investment portfolio.
Yeah.
I may only invest in CDs. I might invest in hedge funds. You know what I mean? Like there's a gambit to run there. That can be true of the node market. If I see a node that is more adverse to risk and might invest in those types of choices, then I'm going to go there if I'm a more risk adverse player. So I think that's how we build systems like this. And let's see, willing to compromise on the design risk involved. I think that's already built into the system. Again, I think that's built into the system.
Could there ever be like a relic that like this node is now like instead of losing 100% of your stuff, it only loses potentially like 80 to 60%, like, and there's like a range percentage. So it's like by having this relic equipped to this node or this settlement, sorry.
I don't think it would be that powerful, but in the same
Okay.
line of effect, what you're describing, right? So barring the numbers you used, is there a relic that would mitigate loss? Yes, I think there should be.
Awesome.
Because it consumes a power source. It consumes a
Right.
cost, right? You can only have so many relics active at a particular time. And again, like there might even be node relationship benefits, trade agreements, resources spent.
So-
Those types of things are avenues. Those are levers we pull, right? The whole point of having these beefy system designs is that they are opportunities to create depth. The way you create depth is you take values, numerical values, and right now we're talking about lost values, resources lost, gold lost in the investment of my home, time lost in the investment, in recuperating my citizenship. Like all those things are really just math points. And we want to play with that math. Well, how do we play with the math and make interesting choices for players to exchange their choices for? Well, we have these verticals. They're policies, they're, trade goods, they're all those things, right? So we use those.
I think Nice made it, or I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, well, like, while I got you here, I had a crazy idea about this. What if the attacker could choose to be more or less vicious? Like, imagine somebody comes and takes over your node, but they're like, hey, you get to keep it all, but we're just taking control of it. Like, what?
Well,
I
just really want to
actually
get that
about that.
crafting station up, but I don't want to destroy your node.
We have designs in place for that.
Okay,
which is siege scrolls. So certain siege scrolls have certain game mode rules, and siege scrolls will have different costs associated with them. So if a siege scroll, let's say, wanted to target just a building to destroy, that may be a siege scroll that we offer, and it might have a very limited cost associated with it, right? So like that is an element where what are you really doing with this design? Well, you're presenting a lower risk profile against a lower opportunity, right? And that's okay. That's in balance. That's good. But ultimately, it's still creating the same event. It's still creating the same player activity, right? It's still an investment for those people to participate and want to defend. That's cool because you get more mileage out of the system.
I think that also provides like the point earlier when we talked about like feeling like people just settlement hop, like with siege destruction, like you won't do that because if you're in a seat or if you're in a settlement that has like guilds or people that aren't good at PvP or maybe they don't care about it, like you may not want to be a part of that settlement because they can get siege and there's not really gonna be much of a battle there. They're gonna lose. So it's like actually paying attention to the politics and what guilds are where will be very determinant, especially when sieging is going to be in place.
For sure. Well, guys, I have got to say, I had a lot of fun. This was a great
awesome.
panel. I just want to
sure.
say kudos to you guys for coming at me with questions that were well thought of. And I think that the community enjoyed hearing, obviously, not just our philosophy, but our intentions, what's in the game now, how we're going to address these issues. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, any interested person in what we're trying to create with Ashes of Creation wants to hear from the person who has creative control over the vision. And I can give you, with all honesty, our intentions. How we're going to execute may be a different story. As I said, some of these things are subject to change. But what I can guarantee is that you, as an audience, have an opportunity to be with us every step of the way when we introduce, balance, and change and iterate on these systems. And that ultimately is what we're trying to achieve with this development and with the game, because we want to build something that people want. And the only way to really do that is to listen to those people and invite them along the path. So for you guys, Nice, Vladis, Zyback, Lloyd, joining me on this panel and giving a voice to that community to get the questions answered that they want to hear, and for cultivating your communities within the content creation that you do. Thank you guys. You're doing a service to us all.
Yeah, and real quick, just for the people that maybe didn't hear originally, we were not limited on what we could ask. We could ask anything we wanted to. We went more than twice the duration we were supposed to go. It was only supposed to be an hour. We're over 2 hours in. So I genuinely appreciate the bravery because it's very uncommon for these things not to be like PR, very controlled media kind of things. And we hit you with some vicious stuff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I enjoyed every minute.
Yeah, I also appreciate that you're just hitting every variance of content creator as well. Like, I'm not a very big content creator, so I'm privileged to be here. So thank you for giving us the platform to talk and shape around the game. It's been really fun the last 5 years that I've been following. So appreciate you and Intrepid and everybody there.
It's been our pleasure to have you guys. I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, the reason we do what we do is because we do it for people like you guys and the communities you represent, because we are that community. I've watched many of you and all of what you guys produce, not just because I'm building the game, but because I want to see a game like this be played. I would want to play this game. And the only real way to stay informed about these things is through being part of these types of communities. So kudos to you guys for building them, and thank you for joining us on this journey. And thank everybody in the audience for staying with us tonight. I know it's 9 o'clock here on the West Coast, which means it's midnight on the East Coast, and God knows what time it is in Europe. I apologize for those of you who decided to stay up this late.
It's super early in the morning for them.
Yeah, gosh. So appreciate you joining us. We had a lot of fun with you, and I hope you guys did too. Hope you enjoyed the answers, and we will see you all next time on Thursday. Holy smokes. We'll see you guys on Thursday.
Man.
It's going to be scary. Everybody buckle up. I put a brace for impact GIF in the Discord of Picard and Riker. That is what it's going to be like literally at the studio in the war room. So be prepared. It's going to be crazy. All right, guys.
Going to be on SFAM stream tomorrow.
I know, tomorrow. Going to be on SFAM streams tomorrow. That's right. I forgot about that. Thank you for that. I don't know what time.
For that.
We're going to see. We'll see
Check
what
it out
kind of
for
questions
nice.
he has. All right, guys. Have a good night. Later.
See ya.
Thank you.